what is happening with us as black people in our community. I don't think it's all that great to fly in somebody from out of town and pay him $40,000. He speaks to you and leaves you, and then you go back to paying your DT energy bills, and your problems are not elevated. I think the best heroes are the people that are in our community, that are in their own individual capacities, doing a lot of things for this community. And they've done it through the written word. You've heard so many times the saying that the pen is mightier than the sword. There is power in the written word. And that's what we are all about, and that's what this discussion is going to be about. I'm glad that the second panel has more women than men. Before the women beat me up. So at least there's a balance. These panelists here are people who are coming to the table this afternoon with experiences about their lives, and they've been able to chronicle it in a book, to write it in a book format. And I think it's wonderful, it's great when you're able to write about your life, or when you're able to write about an experience and put it in a book, and just look at it, and look at the book and say, that's my life, or that's an experience that I had. And so I'll introduce this panel, and we'll go into discussing the black family. The title of this symposium was Black Literature and Social Change. Throughout our history, you read the souls of black folk, you read the writings of James Baldwin, other black writers of the century who have been able to explain our struggle in book format, that we're able today to read and see what kinds of strategies that they suggested for us to battle Jim Crow or whatever difficulties we had at the time. So I think black literature is an important catalyst to creating a social change in our community. But most of the time, we don't recognize our local authors. Ask yourself, when was the last time you went to an event where they were celebrating local authors? I'm sure you don't even think about the date. Or it's been a long, long time you've been to an event where local authors are being celebrated. So these authors here, mostly women, except for Richard Clay. I don't know how you'll do in that panel, but anyway, I'm sure you'll survive the panel. I'll introduce the authors. Wright King. Wright King wrote a book titled Papa Was the Rolling Stone, A Daughter's Journey to Forgiveness. I don't need to introduce that. I know you know what that means. Papa Was the Rolling Stone, A Daughter's Journey to Forgiveness. Denise Critiden. She wrote a book, Girl in the Mirror. She will explain that when they give their 1-minute introduction. But she's also an important player in this community. She's the editor of the African American Family magazine. And I don't think it will be justice on my part. There is no way you can discuss the state of the black family without bringing in the media. I'm part of the media, and I know most of the time we do more bad things than good things anyway. And I think the media has an important role to play in terms of creating that image about black people, creating that image about Africans. The media plays an important role. So her magazine, aptly titled the African American Family Magazine. Richard Clay wrote a book, Raised Wrong, Educated Was. When we talk about the black family, we talk about education. How many of our young people are going to college? Do we have more black men going to jail than are in college today? Do we have more black women in college today than there are in prison? So these are issues that come up, the question of education of our children today. And Richard Clay's book, Raised Wrong, Educated Was, tries to address some of the complexities in our educational system. And Jenaia Black. And if you can, I believe in the younger generation. I think the future is with us, the younger generation. And this panel would not have been complete, or no discussion here would not have been complete without bringing in a young author, Jenaia Black, who also writes for the Michigan Front Page, which is a sister paper for the Michigan Chronicle. Her book is titled Breaking Point. So I'm going to ask these authors, in the light of our discussion today, the state of the black family, and from their respective, disciplines, writings, let them give a 1-minute introduction on what they think, what comes to mind when we talk about the state of the black family. Is it something that sends you to sleep right away, or is it something that propels you to get to work? Let's start with Wright King.
Okay. Good morning. Okay. Good afternoon. I'm Wright King. No, it's not. Okay. All righty. Good afternoon. I'm Wright King. to answer Bankole's question, when I think about the black family and what that means to me, I, of course, think about... Is it on? Okay. I think about it in context, certainly to the book or the piece that I have written, and as Bankole mentioned, the title of the book is Papa Was a Rolling Stone, A Daughter's Journey to Forgiveness. And what the book talks about, it's a very personal story of mine with regard to growing up in the city of Detroit without a father in my life. I had a father who fathered 10 different children in the city of Detroit, basically fathered none of us, was not involved in our lives. That was 10 different children by 7 different relationships. And so the concept of Papa was a Rolling Stone was very, very real. And so the book again speaks about my experience, and I thought in trying to understand what had happened to me, I recognized that I was not alone, and that there were a lot of African American women out there who were growing up as I did without a father and a male influence, and that template that I believe fathers bring to the lives of their daughters. And so my goal in writing this book is 3 things. Is number 1, to bring about a sense of awareness that there is a problem in the African American community. When you look at the 2000 census, what you find is, when you look at cities like Hamtramck, Detroit, Flint, Saginaw, Pontiac, you find that anywhere from 40 to 60% of the households in those communities are households where they are headed by a single female. And so when you think about that number, 60% of children growing up in an environment in the city of Detroit, for example, are growing up with just a mother in the household. Where are our fathers? And when you think about that, what kind of impact does that have, certainly on our children? And secondly, I'd like for my book to suggest a call to action. In other words, there are some things that we need to do to change our behavior so that we can empower ourselves, and more particularly empower young black men, either through skill development so that they can have employment and jobs, so that they can contribute to the lives of their children. There's a concept that they use in Georgia called deadbeat dads versus dead broke dads. And so there are a lot of young men out there who want to be involved in their children's lives and in the lives of their daughters, but don't have the financial resources because they don't have the job training and some of those other things to be empowered to be involved in their children's lives. And so finally, what I'd like the book to do is to encourage us and to help us to rebuild our black families. We need to empower our young men again so that they can participate. And my book, I'd like to believe, makes a case for fathers. It makes a case for young black men. It does not denigrate where we stand today. Where we stand today is problematic in a big way, but I believe that through recognition that there's a problem, and particularly for young black women, to forgive the fathers who were not in their lives, because at this point, especially for me, I had to come to the place to recognize it is what it is. I need to stop, crying about why my father wasn't there. I need to stop stressing about it. I need to stop trying to understand why he wasn't there. Understand that he was not there. It is what it is. Forgive him, heal, move on, and try to enable others who are going through what I have gone through, and to ultimately try to strengthen our families.
Hello, I'm Denise Critiden, and as Bankole pointed out, I'm editor of African American Family Magazine. If you've never seen, he's holding it up, Reverend King is holding it up. Thank you very much, Reverend King. If you've never seen the magazine, I do have copies in the back of the room. The magazine is now approaching its eighth year, believe it or not. We debuted in April of 1999. We are a free publication, emphasis on free. You can find us all over the community, bookstores, all of the black-owned bookstores, most of the soul food restaurants, a lot of schools, churches, the Detroit Public Library branches, the Farmer Jack's outlets in the city, etc. So whenever you see us, pick us up. Before I explain a little bit more about the magazine and talk about the black family, there's something I'd like to say to all of you. And this is something that I say to myself. everyone present, I want you to think about something. The number one gift that you can give to your community is a healthy you. The number one gift you can give to your family is a healthy you. And the number one gift that you can give to yourself is to be as healthy emotionally as you can possibly be. And by that I mean, I feel like I owe it to all of you to work on myself. And that's why I like to say African American Family Magazine is a magazine that helps to heal and empower the Black family. The book I wrote for teenage girls, Girl in the Mirror, is a book that helps to heal our girls. Because I really don't believe that we can progress as individuals, as a people, until we progress as individuals. And so one of the things I stress with our young women is you have to learn to love yourself. And as a people, we're still so caught up in so many issues. I don't know how many of you are familiar with the magazine, but in the magazine, we'll deal with everything from our hang-ups still about skin tone to our concerns about hair texture. We'll actually deal with some things that some people make and think are trivial, but it's not trivial because it has to do with self-image. We talk a lot in African American Family Magazine about Africa because we're trying to bridge that gap, that disconnect that so many African Americans feel with the continent of Africa. In African American Family Magazine, we do not criticize the Black father. We uplift the Black father because there are so many hardworking Black men out there who are doing all they can for their families. And so while we need to address the concerns, the absentee father, which we do, and whenever we do criticize in an article, we always run a sidebar or a tip box. This is what you can do. These are some solutions. This is where you can call. But more important than that, we want the Black fathers out there who are doing their best and who are committed to their families to know we understand, we know you exist, and the only way that we can empower other men to do what they need to do is to give them real examples. There's an expression I like to use, and that expression is, no one rises to low expectations. We have to kind of give the community a frame of reference, and that's what we try to do with African American Family Magazine. We actually celebrate the Black family, and one issue I put on the cover, I found couples who've been together for 40 and 50 years, because all we hear about in our community are all the broken homes. Well, what about these couples, and we all know some of them, who've been married for 50 years? Whoever talks about them? Who talks about this stuff? And so that's one of the things that we do. We try to build a better community by giving examples of what a better community looks like. We try to create a stronger Black family by giving examples of what a strong, empowered Black family looks like. And so that's what we offer to the community. Let me pass this on. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
My name is Richard Clay, and I have been a teacher at Detroit Public Schools for the past 7 years. I left DPS and began my career as an educational consultant. I now work to train teachers, parents, administrators, and all concerned community members who will listen about how we can begin to develop better, more effective strategies for raising and educating our children. In particularly, I deal with young Black males. I have always been interested in the upliftment of all of our children. That happens to be my specialty. I wrote a book entitled Raised Wrong, Educated Worse, addressing the troubled behavior of our sons in order to help me to do that, which is to spread the word that our sons are not a lost cause. It's just that we need to begin to do things with them more effectively and with more understanding in how we are doing them to get better results. I am the co-founder of the Michigan African American Leadership Summit, a group that works around the Black Action Agenda in trying to organize the African American community here in Michigan and then nationally around action item agendas, agenda-oriented issues that we have to address. And when we look at the state of the Black family, at least when I take a look at it, when I do my analysis, what becomes very important to me is that the black family, there are always things that we can highlight, but when we take an honest look at this overall, the black family is an institution that is crumbling. It is in dire straits. Some of the latest statistics that I looked at, they did not just focus on fathers, but they focused on men, said that 72% of the households in the city of Detroit, they don't even have an adult male living in them, let alone a father. So that means that our young men and our young women are growing up, our girls and our boys are growing up in households where they are experiencing a total imbalance. They have no idea, not even from uncles, older brothers, or whatever the case may be, they have absolutely no idea what the adult male role in the family and in society looks like up close and personal. So we're talking about how can young men grow up to be what they do not see? They can only be what they see on TV, and as we all know, that is not reality. That is fantasy. And because of these things, the black family is crumbling, and most of us are in denial about how urgent the situation is and about what steps need to be taken and how we need to begin to teach our young people a different concept of family. The traditional concept of family won't work for us because the parts are not there. Thank you.
My name is Jenaia Black, and I think that the state of the black family is both a complicated and beautiful thing, because I'm, as a product of a broken family myself, my situation is a little different because I was raised by my father. But I had a very close relationship with both my parents. It's just they had joint custody, and I grew up mostly in my dad's house. Not to say that my mom did not play a part in that, but growing up in that situation, I've noticed that the norm is for parents to be divorced. And I just really think that it's important for the black family is strong. And it just seems like in the instances where there is just the mother in the house, it seems like she does whatever it takes to provide for her children. So that's what the black family represents to me as strength, is when, whether there's a father in the house or not, there's still that strength there. And though it's not typical, we don't always see that there's two parents in the house, or the quote-unquote traditional family where the mom and dad are together forever. You have the two kids and a dog. I just think that, like he said, the kids coming up need to see that. And I think that the media does play a part in that, if we're able to showcase that that's important, that young boys have good role models to look up to, what it is to be a father, what it is to be a responsible young man. If you do happen to get in a situation at a young age, to be there for your kids, to learn how to be a man, go to work, and do the things that you're supposed to do. I just think that as on a whole, that the black family is strong, even though it might be broken in most cases or not. I think that the love that's there, that overall, that the black families are strong, because we, as a people, we love hard. We try to help our family members, and that's just what it represents to me. It's complicated, but it's strong, and it's a beautiful thing. It is a lot of work, but those are the core things that it represents to me as being a product of a family that's been split. I wouldn't say it's broken, but it was definitely split, and coming up with that, the things that I've learned to try to carry over into my marriage is that my husband and I, no matter what happens, we need to be there and provide good examples for our kids. So that's what it represents to me, strength. It is unique, but that love is there, and we just, as a people, I think that as family, as the institution of family, is very strong with us.
I'd like to add something. I'm actually not a very good panelist because I don't like just talking. I like action. So I would like to issue a challenge to everyone sitting there. I started out with the statement that the best gift that you can give the community is a healthy you. That's the best gift you can give your family and to yourself, and that means working on you, but it also means whatever you're doing that's right, please be an example. So I'd like to know how many how many members of the audience are in very healthy relationships right now? I know Danton and Reverend King, and okay, we have a hand there. Those of you who have strong families, you're in a committed relationship, you're raising your children. This is what I'd like to ask you to do. Possibly go to your son's or daughter's school, or go to your church and ask if you can get involved and just be that example. As the brother sitting next to me pointed out, our young men and our young women don't see that example. I grew up in a broken home. I didn't see that example. I didn't have that model. I was at a program once, participating in a program, and I met a middle-aged couple who said that they actually contact schools, and they go to the different schools in our community and just visit with the children at the school, because they said many of these children have never, get this, never met a mother and a father married to one another in a loving, committed relationship. So just presenting that to them was actually a gift they were giving to our children. So that's what I mean by what we do with the magazine. We don't always think that the way to create change is to criticize. The way to create change is to just be a positive example.
I'd like to add something. I think that what Denise has said is very important. I wanted to share with you an article that I sort of stumbled upon as I was doing the research for my book. And that article is entitled Marriages for White People. And I happened to get it on the internet. And if you haven't seen it, just type into your browser Marriages for White People. And it was just an overwhelming experience for me to read this article, and I'll summarize it very quickly. There was a writer by the name of Joy Jones who had visited a classroom in Washington, D.C. for a career day. And in that visit, she was talking about families. And these were young children, black children in Washington, D.C. in an elementary setting. And they were talking about family and how many children the boys wanted to have as adults. And some of the little boys were saying, oh, I want to have 6 children, I want to have 8 children, and so forth. And so she suggested that, well, maybe the next time I come, I will do exactly what Denise suggested. I'll bring in families, a husband and a wife, or couples to come in and talk to you about families and how to raise families. And one little boy piped up and said, oh no, I'm going to have lots of kids, but marriage is for white people. So that, and she used that as the title because it was such a telling statement about what our children see. Mr. Clay made the comment that young men grow up to be what they see. And this, in my mind, is a prime example of young men growing up to be what they see. They don't go home in a lot of cases and see a mother and a father together, living in the same household, functioning as parents. They simply don't see it. So in their minds, here was a 7 or 8 year old little child who simply said, marriage is for white people. This is not what we do. We can have lots of kids, but marriage and the concept of family is the missing component there.
Let me ask a question. Richard, you mentioned something, you said something very strong, that the black family is crumbling and we are in denial. I don't know if the other panelists agree with you, but I want to probe that further. What do you mean when you say we are in denial? And give me some examples.
Well, I say that we are in denial about the true state of the black family and exactly how urgently we need to begin to take steps to improve. So many men just absolutely absent from the picture. And, I give much props to all of the mothers, grandmothers. When I taught at Northwestern, most of our kids, the majority of our kids, were not being raised by their mothers or their fathers. They were being raised by their grandparents, usually their grandmothers who were in their 50s, 60s, and sometimes early 70s. And so many of the, when the school tried to address solutions, and when they tried to have parent-teacher conferences and tell things, many of the things that they were trying to tell these folks to do would not fit because they were not dealing with the traditional family concept. And so I would always try and talk with my administrators, to get them to see, look, we got to begin to do things differently. We got to have programs now for grandparents who are raising these children. We got to begin to have things where when we have a parent-teacher conference, it's got to be somewhere else, where we're keeping the little ones at, and we got to begin to teach these grandparents some things that they're going to be the main caregivers, some things that they can use to burn off the energy of these young people whom they can't match their energy. And another prime example is like most of my fellow panelists, like they've said, Robin and Sister Robin mentioned that we don't want our young people to grow up thinking that marriage is only for white people, and that is important because as a young person, when I was growing up, I didn't see too many healthy marriages, and nowadays, especially amongst people under 35, it's very hard to see healthy marriages. But at the same time, we are in denial if we're going to say that, in the terms of the black family concept, that marriage is the only solution, because they did a series of articles that appeared in newspapers across the country. You can go and begin looking them up last year, where they went to all of the major urban cities and even the smaller cities across the United States where there are majority or large black populations. And what they found was that in the marital ages of black men and women, black women outnumbered black men 3-to-1, going up to 6-to-1 and 7-to-1. This was in all of your large cities and then your smaller cities to your Flints and Pontiacs all across the country. They started printing articles like, communities with no men. And so that means that even if we had a perfect situation where every brother out here who was functional and of age married a sister, it would still leave 2 to 3 to 4 to 5 sisters without a mate. And this is what I'm saying. We're the government officials who first started talking about there would become a day, like Robert McNamara did, there would come a day where black families would be lacking black men. There would be they started that talk in the late 60s and early 70s. And now, and we didn't do anything for 30 years, and now that day has literally come, and we have to begin to take some different methods and different strategies to begin addressing these problems. And that was what I was talking about.
Any of the panelists want to comment? Well, let me inject this issue about Bill Cosby. Where is the bill? Where do you place the Bill Cosby conversation in this?
Well, that's opening up a can of worms, I'm sure, for many of us. I think with Bill Cosby, some of us need to stop getting angry at Dr. Cosby and start listening to him, because this guy is a multi-billionaire. He is not gaining anything from this. I think he's just decided he's accomplished all he's going to accomplish in his lifetime, and he doesn't want to go out watching his people just spiral downward, and that's exactly what's happening. It seems that we've gotten to the point that we feel that we have it made now, and that it's more important to acquire things than to build your inner self. And I know a lot of people were angry at Dr. Cosby, but I'm going to tell you something. I was participating in a special black expo on Hart Plaza and was standing next to the owner of the Schoolhouse bookstore. And he was really upset when I first arrived, because he said, "You're not going to believe this, but a couple of families have walked by and the children have seen the books and their eyes light up. And the parents will say, 'Come on here, you don't need that stuff.'" And I said, "You are kidding." And so I stood there, I was so shocked by what he had to say, I stood there and got into a conversation with him. While we were talking, would you believe that the same thing happened while I was standing there? Which means this isn't an anomaly. A family walked by, well-dressed, so these weren't people who didn't have money. The children saw the books, their eyes lit up like they were looking at a Christmas tree, and they said, "What's this, a library?" The children naturally were excited. It was like it's innate. Children like books. Our children do love books if we expose them to it. These children looked at the books, they wanted to walk toward the books, and the parents said, "Come on." you're holding us up. So it's like all he's trying to say is this is an important value. And again, I want to go back to an original point I made. If we want our families to be healthy, we have to be healthy. The parents were not as healthy as they could be. They didn't have the proper values to then instill in our children. So right now in our community, I think we have some really strong value issues, and I think that's what we need to heal. And I'm sure everyone has a lot to say about Bill Cosby's comments, so I'm not going to hold this up. Robin?
I certainly think that Bill Cosby's comments are certainly to be taken well. I am not one to criticize his comments. I think I've had the opportunity to certainly see in our church situations where I would love to see some parents, instead of spending $200 on a pair of tennis shoes for their children, spend $200 on Hooked on Phonics, which I think is, a comment that he made. And so I think all too often, we are too interested in looking prosperous instead of taking our money and our resources and actually being prosperous. I think he made some comments recently at not a Morehouse, a Spelman graduation, where he applauded the women of Spelman to move forward, to graduate, and to be very choiceful about some of the men that they chose to be in their lives, because the thought process is you're going to have to take some of these guys and drag them along with you. Now, that comment kind of concerned me a little bit because, while I think there's certainly some truth to it, the other side to it is we've got to empower one another. I'm not comfortable with denigrating the men in our community, the black men in our community. That's not a comfort level for me. And if there is a problem there, if we are incarcerated at levels that are well beyond what they should be, if we're not attending college at a rate that we should be in terms of our black men, then let's find out what we need to do to empower and to encourage that, rather than certainly criticize that. There's a lot out there to criticize. But again, recognizing that there is an issue, what can we do to help and empower our young black men so that they do go on to college, they do go on to school, or if it is not college and if it is not school, it's the development of some sort of a skill so that they can certainly participate and be viable in the workforce.
Many of the issues that Dr. Cosby addressed were issues that I had addressed in my book, Raised Wrong, Educated Worse. And people who I had been raising some of these issues with before, who were kind of like, yeah, I guess, and kind of arguing with me. And then when Dr. Cosby began to raise them, they said, oh yeah, you had told me about that already. So in terms of sparking discussion, I'm glad that Dr. Cosby came out and began raising some of those issues so that we could begin to have these types of local and national, discussions or in debates in some cases. However, I found a little bit problematic sometimes the spirit in which Dr. Cosby made some of his comments. I remember I showed one of his video presentations to my class, and they were into it, but then, a couple of times he says things like, I don't want to hear about the government. I don't want to hear about what white people did to you. I don't want to hear about the history. Okay, and then what that does is that puts all of the focus. Dr. Cosby's comments are generally made about poor young black males and then poor black people in general, poor black parents. In which there's a lot of, there's a lot to look at. There's a lot of issues within our communities, but there are a lot of issues that come from the super uber black middle class. The Dr. Cosbys, the Oprah Winfreys, the Magic Johnsons. There's a lot of mistakes that they are making. They have all of this money, and yet we don't have the institutions in our community that other communities have. They have these millionaires and these billionaires. And Dr. Cosby won't address that part of this is a community issue. That part of our community problem, he won't address. If Detroit Public Schools closes 52 schools which is 25% of our schools, and then all the rest of our children get piled up on each other and the classes become overcrowded and they go absolutely wild. He doesn't want to address the governmental decision to close the 25% of the schools. He only wants to address the resulting wild behavior of the kids, which puts all of the onus on the kids, and so on and so forth. So when somebody doesn't want to address the institutions that are acting against our people, against our poor, and against our young, and they only want to focus all of the blame and attention on our poor and our young, that kind of causes me to think they might have another agenda. So that was my problem with it.
I agree with the other panelists with regard to what Dr. Cosby said. I think that he addressed some things that needed to be addressed, and I also agree with Mr. Clay that he could have been a little bit more sensitive to some of the issues. But with regard to strengthening the family, I think that parents need to inconvenience themselves a little more as far as taking an active interest in what their children are doing, because I know that nowadays there's so many things that we have to do to make ends meet with the working and everything, and it's sometimes easier to just come home and sit the kids in front of TV after dinner and, you know, so we can get some rest. I think that we need to hold them accountable when they come home from school. You know, turn the TV off, read a book, or we'll sit down and go over your homework together. It is an inconvenience for us because we're tired, but we have to make those sacrifices to let our kids know that these things are what's expected of them, that they can't just do enough to get by. Because typically, children learn what they live. When I was younger, my parents didn't let me do that kind of stuff. When I came home from school, the first thing I had to do was homework first, and we could watch TV for maybe an hour out the day. And I hated it, but now that I'm older and I have, you know, my own children, I appreciate it because I would rather pick up a book rather than turn on the TV. And so I'm trying to instill that in my son now that he's 10. It's like he'll come home now and he has to read his book, but then he'll come run to me and say, "Mom, you know, this is what happened in this book. You know, I'm really enjoying this," or whatever. So it's getting easier as it goes. But I just think that, you know, us taking the extra time to interact with our kids and make sure that maybe, you know, they're in a sport, taking them to the games or something like that so that they're not so inundated with video games or being in the street and doing stuff like that. I know it's hard, but I think that that's just something that we might have to sacrifice in order to instill in our children the values and morals that they need to have to carry over to when they get into adulthood and start having their own families.
You know, I'd like to add something to that, Jenaia, because I think it's kind of unrealistic to really believe that most people are going to turn off the television and monitor what their children are watching. I believe that everyone on this panel would, and most people in the audience would, but we're just talking about everyday people. I mean, come on, they're not going to do it. So this is what I'd like to suggest to people, to all of you in the audience, and if you mention this to everyone you know, get people to understand somehow that if you must sit your children in front of the television and have TVs in every room, something that seems to be so popular now. If you won't listen to that, at the very least, can you turn off the television at night while they're sleeping? Can we please turn the TV off at night while we're asleep? Because this is what's happening. Ladies and gentlemen, we're being programmed all day long. And what's even worse is that our children are receiving so much negative programming because most of those sponsors, they're not after you and me, they're after our kids. So they're being constantly programmed, and we're trying to counteract. If we're going to try to counteract the negative effects, can we at least turn it off at night, because the subconscious mind does not sleep. So that means if you have the television on while you're sleeping, you're continuing that programming even after hours. And so whatever negative behavior is occurring, whatever murder, whatever fight, it's all seeping into your subconscious. So please understand the power of programming and how it affects our young people. Mention that to your neighbors. Mention that to everyone you talk to. That's where it all starts. The other thing I'd like to suggest to the audience, if we understand that our young men aren't getting the proper role models, if we understand that our young women are being exposed to videos that make them feel as if they have to have this kind of sexual image, the only way we can counteract that is to give them something positive. Our brain consists of neural pathways, and so whatever you've seen is part of your brain. Whatever you've seen remains a picture in your mind. So you have to give them something else. Have any of you, most of you are familiar with affirmations, correct? The power of affirmations. Affirmations are positive statements you make to yourself about yourself. We think between 40 and 50,000 thoughts each day. Every single day, 40 to 50,000 thoughts float through our mind. Some of those thoughts are negative. So if we take this positive statement and we repeat it over and over again, or we take this positive statement, write it on an index card, put it on your child's light switch on their bedroom wall, put it in the bathroom, put it on their dresser, something positive, something like, I believe in myself, I am positive, I am powerful. Just something as simple as, I believe in myself, I am positive, I am powerful. Something like that, just to counteract all the negative programming they're getting day in and day out. Because these negative things that we've been talking about are going to be with them. The only way we're going to get rid of them is to come up with something positive and push that through. Because of those 40 to 50,000 thoughts, it only takes 3,000 positive thoughts to create more positive things in our lives. Thank you.
Let me ask the next question. I'll ask 2 more questions and then I'll open it to the audience. Can you just...
Yeah, just very quickly. What you said is so very important, but the reality is these kids are actually getting negative affirmation from their teachers, from their parents. They're nuisances because we have skeleton families where you have people getting shot, and killed, or the drugs, or the unemployment. So what you have is consistent opposite affirmations where people who are paid to take care of these kids are looking at them like, get away from here. You're going to be just like your daddy. They're going to hear constant.
I agree with you 100%. I know a little boy who's around 4 or 5 years old, and his grandmother says negative things to him. So what I said to him, I said, Ricardo, this is what I want you to do. I'm not there with his grandmother. I can't stop her from saying these things. But I can tell him this. I said, Ricardo, I want you to say every single day, I am lovable because everybody loves me. And so I didn't see Ricardo. I mean, he's my girlfriend's nephew, right? I didn't see him for a month. I walked into the door of my girlfriend's house, and he happened to be over there. The minute he saw me, you know what he said? He says, I am lovable because everybody loves me. So what I'm trying to say is, I can't stop what he's hearing at school. I can't stop what his grandmother is saying to him, but I can give him one positive statement. And that's my gift to him that he can give to himself, because this is what happens. If a carpenter wants to get an old nail out of a piece of wood, he takes a new nail. He puts the new nail on top of the old nail. He takes a hammer. He pounds the new nail in, pushes the old nail out. And that's what I'm trying to do, because with affirmations, what we don't realize is that we're creating new neural pathways within our own brain. And what a powerful thing for a very young person, as young as 5, to have. So that's what I mean about the healing. We can't stop what's going on out there, but we can start controlling what's going on in here. Okay?
Let me switch the pendulum a little bit here. We talk about the black family. We know we have Michigan, the state population here, 14% African American, 70% are incarcerated. The numbers are overwhelming. And talk about the black family. There are institutions that are geared towards catering or addressing some of these problems that we have. Talk about the prison industry. We do have civil rights organizations. We do have institutions that are out here that are supposed to be addressing these issues, and some of us are members. You talk about violence. We have organizations that are out to do those things. So they talk about education, DPS, and all these education activist organizations. The question becomes, in your own perspective, are these institutions functioning for us to have a functional black family? Any of you?
I don't think they have to function. When we were in slavery, we loved one another. We shared with one another, and we didn't kill one another. Okay? So you don't have to have all these institutions. I think what Denise is saying about an idea is powerful. It's powerful. Even before we had husbands and wives who could stay together with their children in slavery, we still had aunties. And the aunties ran it. All of us who were abandoned and lost our parents, they fed us. They taught us who we were. And they gave us those words, say, don't worry about what master say, you smarter than he is. Don't worry about what they did to Toby. And Celie in the color purple, she said, you know, I might be black, I might be ugly, I might be poor, but I'm still here. Amen. The black family is still here. And if we allow this society to reframe and determine that we are less than healthy, I think we are the most resilient people, the most intelligent people. Because in spite of all the odds, and there are many against us, we persevere and we do raise healthy ones. We do raise high achievers. We do raise inventors. We do raise millionaires. We still do that against tremendous odds. So the institutions I don't worry about. I worry about whether I can love him. I can give and receive love from this boy. Okay? To open him up maybe, to love and receive, to give and receive love from somebody's daughter. And he will bring that daughter to me so I can love her and give and receive love. That's the most important thing we have done for one another. Even when we couldn't read, we had ethics and morals about our families. This is the first generation that I can see that wasn't concerned about whether we could read or not. We buy computer games, and I love that statement you did about hooked on phonics. We're hooking our kids, and we're paying for addictions. Those neural pathways that Robin's talking about, those are dangerous things. I think we need to be teaching mothers about that. When they get pregnant, say, watch what you eat. Your brain is developing. You know, you got a jewel in there. This is what you do. This is important stuff. Old women used to do that, but now nobody wants to be old. I'm an old woman. All right. I'm an elder in the community, and I'm going to stand. And every time, I'm going to just try them one at a time, because I get tired easily. But the family, what we say, what's wrong with the black family is endemic in the society, is any family. All of them are falling apart.
All right. Sounds like the oracle has spoken. Richard, can you hold on? Let me get a reaction from the audience quickly.
The question about institutions, this is a critical question. That's why I just took a second, because you know, all human beings are going to be raised by their primary caregivers first. But then all human beings, as they are raised, are going to be impacted upon. Each and every one of our development is heavily influenced by the institutions that are around us. The society as a whole plays a role. School is an institution, very important institution. That's why they made it mandatory. It's mandatory from age 4 years on that our children go to school, and that is an institution that plays an important role in their lives. And so it's important that we look at the role that it is supposed to play and see if it's meeting those. Church is an institution that has always played a role outside of the parents and the immediate family of shaping the morals and values of children in the society. Then there are economic institutions. There are the institutions that we use to get our civil rights. And this is not just with black people. This is all groups of people around the world. They depend on the institutions that are in their community. Families have never just did it alone. The supportive institutions that help families, that help the black family to come from the south to the north, that help the black family to get voting rights, institutions that we have for long depended on. And what we're seeing is that as the black family has crumbled under the weight of globalism and poverty and downsizing, with companies laying off here and opening up overseas and taking the jobs out of urban communities and taking them way over there to cheap labor so they could go to Mexico and Thailand and pay people 30 cents an hour where we want $20 to $30 an hour. These types of changes have impacted on the black family. They've impacted on the institutions that used to help the black family. And as the family has waned, our surrounding institutions has waned. And this really becomes a question of leadership. When Dr. Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and many of the other leaders that we lost during the civil rights that we celebrate during Black History Month, when we lost them, we needed people to step up and build new leadership institutions that could replace or strengthen or bring back those that we had lost and get them back to the forefront. And this is where we've kind of gotten lost in this process. We do have the inventors, as the elder said. We are still producing inventors and scientists and all of that stuff. But the problem is, nationally, the numbers say that only 50% of Black kids are graduating from high school. 56% for our girls and only 42% for our boys. And this is after they fudge the numbers up as much as they can. So we're not producing nowhere near the amount of leaders that we need to be if we're not even getting half of them out of high school. And we have to begin to address that and get our children to understand at a young point, yes, you are loved. Yes, you are. There are many positive things about you. Yes, you have these capabilities. And not just try and get them to go to college for the sake of getting a good job, but they have to understand that they have to go and develop their leadership skills and come back to our communities and help build up the institutions that are going to better support their young brothers and young sisters.
I want to raise a real critical issue. When Brother Richard mentioned earlier that we're in denial, one of the major issues we're in denial about is that Black people in America really face economic elimination. I live in Pontiac. If you look at the I-75 corridor starting north with Saginaw, Saginaw has lost 50,000 GM jobs. You go half hour down to Flint. Flint has lost over 100,000. Pontiac, where I live, a city of only 65,000, has lost over 35,000 GM jobs. You go further south to Detroit, over 300,000. See, the problem with us now, we are dealing with some unprecedented issues we've never faced in history. They don't need us now in the global economy. Within 10 years, China and India will have the largest economies in the world. I was looking at some recent data. In 1861, 98% of Black people depended on whites economically. In 2004, 98% of Black people still totally depend on white people economically. We are being displaced, and that displacement is causing massive economic instability within the Black family. If you look at the prison system, when we talk about 80% of young Black males who are in prison under 30 are there because they're selling dope. When we look internally as we're being displaced by the global economy, internally, let's keep it real, we don't control nothing. Arabs dominate 98% of our economy. So the reality of it, we talk about effectiveness, whether civic organizations, Black political organizations, church organizations have not come up with any contingency plans to deal with the massive displacement of Black people. Therefore, what we do, brothers and sisters blame each other because we're dealing in frustration politics, and then we blame our children. And let's face it, we cannot do anything for our children. Right now, if 10,000 young Black males say we'll never sell crack again, do we got even 100 jobs to give them? So what I'm saying is that we need to look at, as we move forward, how are we going to address an unprecedented crisis of economic displacement of Black people, which is a fundamental problem of basically most of the problems that we face.
That's right. Well, we have a panel coming up. Sounds like a social justice sermon, but there's a panel coming up called on civil rights, academics, and politics, and so definitely weigh in more on that. Let me get the reaction from the panel.
My comment is really geared towards your question with regard to institutions. There are institutions out there that are available for us to take advantage of the resources, and we don't position ourselves always to take advantage of those resources. And one example is the public school system. I have a number of friends of mine who are teachers in the Detroit public school system and who are teachers out in West Bloomfield, teachers in Birmingham, teachers all over the community. And the common theme that I hear from teachers in some of the urban areas is that they have to deal with a whole different set of issues when it comes to teaching our children. You have children who are not prepared to come to school to learn because they come to school hungry in the morning. And if you come to school hungry in the morning, you really, really aren't prepared to sit down and behave like the sponge that you should behave to take on or take in the resources, educational resources that are provided to you. Thank you. Additionally, some of these children are provided, they have special programs in the school now where they will feed some of these children at 3 o'clock going home. Because for many of these children, this is the last meal that they're going to have for the day. And that is because, again, there's dysfunction at home that does not provide an environment for these children to learn. So that there are some institutions out there that are very beneficial for us, but we simply are not in a position from a family perspective to take on these resources. Education, in my opinion, is the foundational issue to a lot of these problems that we're having in our community. And if we don't take advantage of the opportunity for education, then we're going to continue to be a sick community, and our families will continue to be sick.
Let me ask the next question, and then I'll open the discussion to the audience. I want to bring in an important industry here. I think you can't talk about in 21st century America, Black America in particular, you cannot talk about the black family without bringing this important industry, and it's called the hip-hop industry. And its overwhelming influence on the lives of our young black men. Somebody claimed and said, and I don't know if you agree with me, today most young people will see 50 Cent and the rest of them as more or less as their idols, rather than looking at perhaps the life of Dr. King, or rather than looking at Du Bois and some of our pacesetters, who are trying to create political and social change, as role models. Why do you think, if you agree with that assertion, why do you think there's an overwhelming influence? The hip-hop industry has an overwhelming influence on young people than what it shouldn't be. And if that is the case, do you think, because this is the notion out there, do you think the older generation has failed?
Wow, heavy hit.
That's a big question, and if you relate it to hip hop, I don't think there's any question. When people critically analyze hip hop and what has come out of hip hop and what is coming out of the lyrical content, the message, the swagger, the attitude, the tone, then the young people, because most of the hip hop artists, although some of them from my generation are still hanging on, but let's just be honest, hip hop is almost like a sport. It's always going to be dominated by the younger artists. And the artists of today are a reflection of who? The people who raised them.
That's right.
They don't make all of these things up. They didn't invent anything besides the format of the music itself. They don't invent any of the issues or the topics that they talk about. They didn't invent any of the words that they're talking about. They heard it all from us and the generations before me. So when people get real upset about what they're displaying, the anger that they have, the way that they look at the society as a basic failure, and the only thing that a young black male out here can do is sell dope, or as Biggie Smalls said, either you got a wicked jump shot or you slang crack rock. This is the way they see the world. You either slanging, banging, or you shooting a jumper on the court. Otherwise, you don't have a way out. They didn't grow up with the ability to, as my father always says, and my uncles used to tell me about how they would go and work in one Chrysler plant, and if something they didn't like about that, they quit that day and walked across the street and got another job.
Right.
And so at a different plant. And then in terms of the male-female issue, because that is a serious issue, the bees and the hoes and all of the other stuff is, the language and the attitude towards women, because although now there are more females in hip hop, it's still predominantly a male sport. Well, that goes back to what types of relationships have they grew up with their parents in? What types of relationships have they been invested in as young people? And their attitudes are just reflected on the records. And of course, when you on record, you can say more things than you can say to somebody when they're in your face. So if somebody did something to you last week and you didn't like it, maybe you said, I didn't like that, but you was afraid of the consequences, but you go in the studio, now you can say, B, I really didn't, you know what I'm saying? You can amp it up. And you gonna amp it up because you're trying to sell records. So I say that to say, yes, we have failed this younger generation. We have failed to give them the knowledge, the wisdom, and the support. A lot of older people just said, we don't like hip hop, and therefore we didn't support it, and we didn't try to coddle them and give them insights, and therefore they took insights from those who supported the industry, and the people who did that were the businesses, the liquor companies, the cigarette companies, the people who sell the Swisher blunts. And so now you got rappers rapping about that stuff and naming themselves after that.
That's right.
We can affect hip hop by bringing them back in, by understanding that we are raising the next generation of hip hoppers and putting the values and stuff into them that we want, and supporting them and buying their records and teaching them how to get around the business execs that won't promote positive hip hop, by setting up their own websites, by teaching them economic development and business skills. We can create the new hip hop industry.
Right on the point.
I think, unfortunately, hip hop falls under sort of the genre of being just music that is totally negative. And I don't think all of hip hop is negative. I have two sons, 24 and 21, and have gone through that growing process with them where I had the option and the opportunity as a parent to say, you're not going to listen to that in my house, you're not going to listen to that in my car, but I listened to it in my house. I let them listen to it in my house, and I listened to it in the car because I thought this is an opportunity for me to understand what they're hearing. Because if they're not hearing it in my house and they're not hearing it in my car, they're still hearing it. They're going to go someplace else and hear it. And so why not take the opportunity as a parent to understand what they're being influenced